there's a federal law called Title 4D. It was passed in the late 1970s. This is the cause of the divorce explosion in the 1980s and the creation of, there were no family courts in the early 1980s. They didn't exist. They were created specifically because of Title 4D. Title 4D provides for matching funds for the collection of child support. So I don't know about Virginia, but I know about Texas. In Texas, it's $500 million. It's $480 to $520 million per year. The more child support that's issued, the more money the state gets in reimbursements. The more it collects, the more it gets in the entire Texas Attorney General's office is funded by the child support collection matching funds from Title 4D. Texas actually has a law in the Texas Government Code which requires all judges to rule in cases in such a way to maximize Title 4D reimbursements.
Wow.
Before anything is heard in case. This explains a lot of peculiar things in family court. Family court's known for giving custody to the dysfunctional parent, and they just do it consistently. They do it all the time. I watched a case ahead of mine one time, and they gave 2 children back to a heroin addict mother who had successfully passed a drug test after 15 days for the first time.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
What was the
why
alternative?
Would they do that? That makes no sense, right? Everybody goes, nobody in their right mind would do things like, why do they do it? Here's why they do it. The state knows full well it will never collect child support from a heroin addict. And all that matching money, they don't get it.
Got it.
They know that the responsible parent will bankrupt themselves to protect their child and to take care of their child, and they'll get all the matching money for that. So the decision in family court doesn't come down to, are you a fit and willing parent? If that were the case, then in 99% of the cases, you would have both parents getting 50-50 custody because both parents are fit and willing, right? Most abuse is actually much rarer than we think, right?
Yeah.
So abuse and neglect, those are 2 ends of the spectrum, right? So what they do is they say, which person here will give me the maximum Title IV reimbursement for the state?
Wow.
And that's the person who loses custody so that they pay child support. That's the real calculation that's going on. You mentioned CPS, and if you're looking at laws around this, you need to know about Title IV-E. Title IV-E gives reimbursements for taking children. So when the state takes a child from a family, they get a Title IV-E reimbursement just like Title IV-D. Here's how it works in Texas. You'll get a satellite office in a rural county of Texas that's running low on budget. They'll look for a child to low IQ parents under 18 months of age, but they'll go as high as 2 with no medical problems, and they'll go and take their children. They usually do it through subterfuge. They do a well check and they bring along an extra party that they don't tell the parents are a psychologist. Mm-hmm. The psychologist, unbeknownst to them, is doing a psych eval and recommends taking the children. They take the children. Within 6 months, the child is adopted out, and that satellite office gets $250,000 in budget money. So there's financial incentives to take children. There's financial incentives to take fathers out of the home. So as a legislature, you have to ask yourself, how do you change the incentives in the bureaucracy? Well, I will submit to you that this is, if you look at the total money in all the states, this is as large as some of the largest defense programs.
Yeah.
And we've never successfully cut a large defense program. That's never happened in
I can
American
tell you
history.
I can tell you right now, the political palatability of the only way this is going to be discussed, there will be no level-headed discussion like we're seeing taking place, right? It will be this idea that you just don't want women to be able to leave abusive situations, or you don't want children to be able to get the proper child support they need. Like, you just don't want that. You're the deadbeat dad supporter. And the problem is, this is always the problem with government trying to fulfill certain functions within society for which it was never truly designed to do. And it's these sort of second and third order effects that we don't get, is that it sounds great. It really, I mean, think about this on a 50,000 foot level. It sounds great to say, well, of course, we're going to provide funding to, let's say, a smaller jurisdiction, a poorer jurisdiction that doesn't have the resources to be able to intervene and to be able to get a kid out of a dangerous situation,
Right.
or, ensure that children are financially supported by a parent that should be paying child support. It makes perfect sense if you're assuming that this is always going to be operated the way it was intended and only for the purposes that it was intended. Because what you've actually done, and we see this with other welfare programs, what you've actually done is incentivize the state to now engage in certain activities. And we've seen this with COVID spending. We've seen it with welfare spending. We've seen it with everything else. You're not just getting the reasonable use case scenario. You're creating a perverse incentive.
That's right.
Okay, so
if you ever want to know why young men are not marrying, I speak to young men all the time. I get invited to speak to masculinity conferences and so forth. This is what they tell me. They go to church and they get cajoled to get married. They're told that it's their duty, it's their God-given duty. The problem is they have actually witnessed their father's lives become totally destroyed. I talk to lots of young men. They're like, my father lived out of a car for 6 months.
Yeah.
Because the court I don't think, people understand the impact of child support. So in Texas, if you have 2 kids, they're going to take 30% of your gross pre-tax income. Okay. Most businesses could never survive confiscation of 30% of their pre-tax revenues. They would just go out of business. Yeah. I've done the numbers. If in Dallas County, based on cost of living, if you make less than $45,000 a year, you cannot rent a home. You're left with about $800 a month to live on. So it doesn't work. Second thing is you don't get to deduct that money as childcare expenses. Like that's one area where you could make it back up, as if you had a deduction or a credit. Actually, the mother that you pay gets to deduct it as childcare expenses, not you. Okay. Yeah. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, for example, I've been for 11 years, I have had to submit all of my expenses. Like every credit card expense, every cash expense is scrutinized by an attorney, by an accountant, and by the judge in court, because they want to see if they can get more child support from me. Yeah. You permanently lose all financial privacy. I have been told by a judge, I had to file a motion to try to change jobs.
Wow.
Because it paid me $10,000 a year less, but made it more geographically convenient for me. The judge said, no, you cannot change jobs.
Wow.
So you lose all of your freedoms once you get into divorce court if you're designated as the one who pays the child support.
Yeah, no, and I've seen this before too, where it's like the positive use case scenario of this is you have somebody that kind of manipulates the system or leaves a job temporarily in order to get a lower rate requirement for child support, and then immediately gets a higher job or whatever it is, right? Like there's the system can be gamed either way, but you're Definitely. Right. It creates this perverse incentive. Well, and I'll tell you this, I'm a huge marriage advocate, right? I am a ton of my content is about the importance of marriage, the necessity of marriage in society. Yeah. But you're not wrong that here's I'll put it to you the most crass way it was put to me. Nick, please explain to me why I should risk getting married so the government will pay a woman to leave me, take my kids, and I can spend the rest of my life to pay my ex-wife to sleep with another dude.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly what young men tell me.
Yeah.
So and remember, married people vote Republican. Yeah. So when young men decide not to get married, you're increasing the number of Democrat voters out there.